Just want to do a quick response video to Megadan29. He talked about the GameGear just the other day, and it was a pretty cool video, cool discussion. Me and him were talking about this just, a week ago or something. And I have a few things I want to say about it. So I was playing the GameGear just like last week, and I thought to myself, I'm like, guys, I should say, gosh, the GameGear was like really something. It had a backlit screen, it was color. It was definitely in between like 8 and 16-bit graphics, it felt like. Really, it felt more like NES type graphics, but it was portable. It had 6 batteries. Megadan thought it had 8. It had 6, which is a lot. 6 AA's, that's a lot. I never had a GameGear back in the day, and you never see them for sale, especially locally. You could go on eBay and see some for sale, but yeah, locally, I've never seen a damn GameGear, period. So they're just really rare and not common, but the GameGear had some good games. Like, I actually beat a Shining Force game in college on it, so it was fine. It felt just fine. You didn't really need a console to play that game, but I think the GameGear suffered because just basically the games is the answer to it. It didn't have the games that the Game Boy had. The Game Boy is stacked with games. It has like, lowered versions of Super Nintendo games on the Game Boy for many titles, so the Game Boy is stacked. The GameGear just kind of fell short. Like, there's not a lot you need to play on it, and that's the problem. If they would have loaded it up with great games, I think it would have done well. There is one strategy RPG that looks kind of fun, and I actually was playing it just last week, called Crystal Warriors, and that seems like it'd be kind of fun to play. I bet you that's like on GameFAQs. One of the highest rated games, I would imagine, because it's a strategy RPG that actually seems kind of fun. But, Sonic would be all laggy and shitty, and most games would be trash, but that's kind of the problem with the Game Boy. I think someone said a really good thing in Dan's comments. He said, instead of giving us a way to play it on our TV, like, with the Super Game Boy, that's what Nintendo did. It let us play Game Boy games on our Super Nintendo and then have it on our TV. What the Sega guys did is they actually gave us the Sega Nomad, where we could portably play our Genesis games. So we never got a way to play the GameGear games on the big screen. And there's not a big library for GameGear. It's just kind of a thing that fell short. The biggest allure to the GameGear was that movie 3 Ninjas, where one of the guys had a GameGear and he could like control time with it or something. And that made me really want to get it because I loved that movie back then, but I never did have one as a kid. I've never literally had one or held one in my hands, even today. All these years later, I've only played some emulation on it. So yeah, the GameGear's a sad story. It's a forgotten console. It'll be another one of these relics of the past. Like so much other things will be, given 50 years from now, 100 years from now. So much of this stuff is just going to fade into obscurity, So a lot of these consoles that pretty much already have will be extremely scarce. Something like a Sega CD and Television and MSX. I'm just trying to think of all these crappy consoles. A Wonder Swan. Like, this stuff is going to be so rare. Like, no one's going to have them. It's going to be crazy. The GameGear itself, too. I don't know how many of those exist, but they're going to keep breaking down, like Dan hinted at. He says that the screen always broke down on them, and yeah, it's unfortunate because, like I said, the GameGear does look really good. They got colored graphics and the backlit screen, where the Nintendo they didn't have a backlit screen until the Game Boy Advance. So that's my understanding. I don't think a Game Boy Color ever had backlit. You had to have like a little light on the top of your Game Boy that lit the screen if you're playing in the dark, I remember those from back in the day. My brother had one when we went on a big trip. He had that little light that you'd attach to the Game Boy. I think it was powered by the Game Boy too. I can't remember, but the GameGear had, like I said, it was like ahead of its time, kind of, but it still fell short because it's all about the games. That's what it's always going to be. It's going to be about the games. You got to have that. So, sorry GameGear, you're going to die. You're going to become, just a relic of the past. And that's the way it went, but that's going to be the fate of so many things. So you're not the only one. Anyway, guys, that's it. Take care. Check out Megadan29's channel if you're like just on my channel and you've never heard of him. He's a really good channel. He's always got these discussion type videos, and he's a really funny guy. I kind of think of him as just like, I don't know, just like a funny, stupid guy. When I say stupid guy, like he just kind of acts like a dumbass often. And he's just funny. He's a funny, very likable guy, very influential person in the retro gaming community. You know, what happens is he does something and many other people copy him. And they'll go, look, I'm doing it right now. I'm copying Megadan. But hey, I started the discussion. Anyway, guys, take care. Talk to you later.